Hi everyone, Trina here, and this will be 4.1 of Origins of Soul. And before we get into the book, I wanted to discuss a little bit of a review of concept. They've been discussing the fact that our soul, as soon as we leave our body, our soul is going to be brought into a specific dimension or a specific realm. And this realm seems to be, you're going to go with what you vibrate at. So this is what I've been shown over and over again. Your vibration will actually serve as the magnetic pull that will pull you into these different dimensions. So that's the whole raise the vibration, meditate, be still, know that I am. These are profound truths that we need to learn to adopt within our own being, because as a human, our energy fields are pretty busy and they're constantly being hit with a lot of very dark, hard frequencies. So there's a lot of truth to this. And for me, one of the fastest ways to reconnect with my own being is through breath and through the simple act of finding a memory that brings you into a place of spirit, joy, love, comfort, safety, anything. You bring in the whatever you find your mind traveling to. If it is of a negative, discordant vibration, literally think in your mind, what's the opposite of that? What's the opposite? So if it's hate, the opposite is love. If it's rage and anger, the opposite is total forgiveness. So the fastest way to cancel a vibration is to meet it with its equal opposite match, and it makes it go 0 point and it goes neutral. So staying balanced is hard. I've been trying to do this for many, many years, and it is a challenge, but you can do it, and it's worth it, because the more you practice babysitting your own thoughts, the better you become at it. And I think as children, as soon as we would have a thought into our mind, we could make it real. So I think that's part of our imagination and part of the come to me with the eyes of a child, because children can see all the realms that we're actually currently existing in right here, right now. Spirit is trying to give me a message somehow of the 3 inside the 1. So I think it's meaning that we have 3 bodies constantly always operating in this construct. So you having your physical body and your conscious awareness of your physical body is only one of your 3, because you have the soul and then the oversoul. So it's the 1 and the 3. So if we can connect back to all 3, we will be whole, and it will help to stay in balance with the frequencies, because the oversoul and the soul can bring forth frequencies from the higher realms to help counteract the negative frequencies that we're sitting in this realm. So I hope that helps a lot of you find a way to find balance in your being and your body, because it is our first work, is to have peace within. And when you can find how to bring your body into peace and alignment with itself, it supports the whole entire conscious collective, all of us together. So the more of us that can hold these frequencies of well-being, the more well-being we will see upon the planet. And I think right now we're going to see a challenge between those 2 energies. So we need to get really strong within that ability to stay neutral. So I will continue with reading the different places and releasing. And we're getting ready to come into releasing the etheric double at death. And this is the twin. And I can't wait to see what this has to say, because I'm reading this book with you guys. I haven't read it before, so I get to read it with you as we go. So I will continue. And we were in the hell realms. The soul experiences the torments of the Rakshas and the mythological demonic beings found in both the Hindu and the Buddhist scriptures. Sometimes called man-eaters, these frightening spirits can drive a soul mad with anger, fear, judgment, pride, and egoic vanity. As we shall see, these are all creations of the person's mind that has been steeped in ignorance and delusion. In truth, these furies are only aspects of the shadow self that the soul has given into while living here on earth. These negative forces drove the person during its earthly life, and they continue to plague his soul once it passes onto the other side. This is certainly a strong argument for letting go of the destructive emotions of bitterness, rage, resentment, regret, vengeance, judgment, violence, and self-righteousness while we are still in the physical form. For these states of consciousness can not only trap us into the world, but also into the next. The lower realm of the astral plane is a nightmare land, and many of us who have accidentally wandered into this frightening realm or an adjacent one during the courses of our convoluted dreaming lives. However, contact with the lower astral planes can only happen when one's thoughts and feelings fall into such a decline that we are consistently feeling trapped in the negative emotions of anger, hatred, fear, loneliness, depression, or despair. This lowers our vibration. Then we may find ourselves dreaming in one of the lower levels that lie just above the Sheol. In the realms where we see around us, it is merely a reflection of our own resentments, fears, anxieties, however, none of which we see is real. It is only a projection of our own negative thoughts and emotions. This is critically important to remember so that you do not give power. Thus, while any of us can fall into periods of grief or sadness or depression, over the course of a lifetime, it is important to remember that while we are living in this world, we must remain and maintain a positive focus. We must choose not to feed our darker thoughts, for then, and only then, will you be giving more power to your shadow. One way of changing the negative energy is by focusing on spiritual affirmations or maxims, as the ancient philosophers did. Another way is through prayer, in forming a connection with this powerful life-affirming grace of the spiritual masters who serve this light, and with the angelic forces that are never far from us, but who work by invitation only. There is a law, the law of non-interference. And this is my understanding of this law. We have so much support around us, but the law of non-interference will keep the benevolent good beings at arm's length distance from you, not able to truly help you, because they cannot unless you ask. And that's truth. I've seen this time and time again. And I've been in positions where I was like, where were you? Why weren't you there? And they were like, why didn't you call? So I believe there's a lot of truth to this. So never forget, you have help, but you need to ask. That's how we lean and depend on each other. And that's our strongest tool, is each other. So another way of counteracting the shadow is by reading spiritual literature on a daily basis. Writings that are transmuted from the higher realms have a vibration that will pierce darkness, pierce pain, grief, and sorrow, and it will lift you into a higher vibration of love. The more that you can focus your thoughts in this direction, the quicker you will be able to transform your emotions. Releasing the etheric double at death. In Greek cosmology, it was believed that to enter the realm of Hades, the soul had to cross the river Acheron. As movies such as Clash of the Titans depicted, the Greeks believed that the soul had to be ferried across the river by the ferryman. His price was a small golden coin called an obelisk that was placed upon the eye or the mouth of the deceased person. It says that for hundreds of years, there were paupers gathered on the shores of the river, stuck between the worlds, that these people did not have a coin to give to the chariot to help them on their passage across. Some Greeks even made a practice of offering libations to these unhappy spirits to prevent them from haunting the living. These are the pretas in the Tibetan Buddhism, the hungry ghosts whose cravings and needs keep them perpetually trapped into the lower astral plane. Greek cosmology also taught that there was the guardian of Hades. There was a Cerberus, the three-headed dog, who stood on the far side of the river. Like a loyal Basenji dog, Anubis, in Egypt, he conducted souls to the hall of judgment. Once the soul passed beyond this point, it had officially entered the land of the dead. Theosophical wisdom, much of which is based on the Bardo teachings of Buddhism, teaches that once a person dies, there is a period of time which the subtle energy bodies detach from the physical body. While some parts of us travel up into the middle or higher regions of heaven, the etheric sheath that acts like the interface between spirit and matter often remains on earth for a time. It is said to detach from the body during the first 36 hours after death. This etheric double body is the closest to the physical world, exactly mirroring the structures of the physical body it served. When we are living, this etheric double is a blue-gray in color, and it extends about an inch from the body, mimicking its shape and appearance. If the person is buried, then this etheric double may float over the grave for a time until it slowly disintegrates. But if the body is cremated, the etheric double breaks up very quickly, having lost its physical center of attraction. This is the one reason, among many, why cremation is preferable to burial as a way of disposing of the bodies of the dead, for it frees the soul from any connection with the etheric double, giving it nothing to tether into the earth. If the etheric double does not disintegrate properly, it can become a shade. In theosophical literature, a shade is an aspect of the astral body that can sometimes form lower mental attachments. It appears that an exact duplicate of the physical person, complete with all of its idiosyncrasies, it is not a hungry ghost, but rather a trapped portion of the etheric double or subtle energy field that connects the soul with the physical body. Interesting. So then it speaks of the 5 rivers of Hades. And these rivers represent the 5 most negative states that keep us trapped in a dark state of consciousness. The emotions of sorrow, grief, anger, forgetfulness, and hatred. These are the life-smothering feelings that keep us stuck in a state of self-blame, judgment, self-righteousness, vengeance, and regret. A reminder to those of us still in the land of the living. Dispel these dark emotions while you still have the chance. What I find most intriguing about this cosmology is that it was the river of hate, the river of Styx, that formed the boundaries between the upper and the lower worlds. This tells us that the choice between love and fear is what finally divides the realms of darkness from the worlds of light. To be free of the shadow within, we must first let go of any hatred of ourselves or others. This is the true power of forgiveness. Chapter 5, the Book of Life and Death in the Halls of Amenti. Every soul comes into this world strengthened by the victories and the weaknesses, by the deficits and defeats of its previous life. Origin. While Greek cosmology developed over many centuries, they originally received their teachings about the afterlife from the Egyptians. The Egyptian cosmology is recorded in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The ancient funerary text, also known as the Book of Emergence, forth into the light. It describes how the newly departed soul, led by Anubis, the faithful part canine servant, boards a vessel called the Boat of a Million Years. It then travels through the Duat, a term that refers to the crossing of the dimensions, accompanied by a group of powerful gods on its way to the halls of Amenti. Then, in the halls, its life is recorded in the Book of Life during a ceremony called the Weighing of the Heart. At this point, it decides whether the soul can go into heaven or even get into the halls of Amenti. The soul had to take the voyage in the Boat of a Million Years and face a series of trials and tribulations in the boat with Anubis. Anubis was the sun god Ra, who symbolizes the radiant light of the soul that lives within us all. Thoth, the initiator of the mysteries, who represents the wisdom of the soul, a quality that we need to get into heaven. And Isis, the goddess of compassion and the great mother of humanity, who gives us the power to open up our hearts and heal ourselves. Beside Isis stands Ma'at, the principle of cosmic truth and cosmic law. Those who murder, steal, rape, and lie do not live in accordance with this higher law. They are in service to the little self and have forgotten that what we do to others, we are also doing to ourselves. Since we are all aspects of the one, when we wrong one another, we also wrong ourselves. This is experienced directly in the life review of the soul when it enters heaven. In this place of ultimate reckoning, we meet a great being of light, often wind up judging ourselves for our own wrongdoings, because we clearly now see and feel the error of our ways. Finally, at the front of the boat is Set, the little ego self, or ego, who tries to steer the ship with its oar. Set represents the shadow within each of us. In Egyptian mythology, Set is the imperfect god who covets his brother's land and tries to take his brother's wife. He was known to lie, cheat, kill, and steal for his own ambitions. And then he murdered his brother Osiris, the Lord of Light. Set's original name was Satu. Perhaps the origin of the name Satan we see today. Set is the small personality self that tries to steer our life. He is the inner Satan who has only his own self-interest at mind. Although this shadow must also travel with the soul towards the light of heaven, his role is a limited one, as we shall see shortly. As the boat of 1,000,000 years sails through the duat, it traverses the darkness of the starry realms. Like the dark tunnel encountered by modern near-death experiences, this phase of the journey is dangerous for the soul. It must do battle with the apophysis and the many-headed serpent. This is a picture of Anubis and the chariot of Set. Okay. So the many-headed serpent that lurks in the fog. Apophysis, or Apophius, I don't know how to say that pronoun, but represents all of the negative personality traits and emotions and thought forms that we have not yet conquered in our lifetime, including lust, greed, addiction, fear, anger, vanity, self-judgment, shame, and guilt. Comparisons to the Tibetan Book of the Dead. This encounter with the dreaded serpent, Apophysis, brings to mind the Bardo Thodol, commonly known by its translated title as Liberation Through Hearing during the Intermediate State, or more commonly as the Tibetan Book of the Dead. This text is among the many treasures attributed to the 18th century CE precious guru Padmasambhava, who secreted it in various locations throughout Tibet. At this time, he concealed these teachings. He foretold that these texts would again be revealed later at an appropriate time. These treasure teachings were revealed in the 14th century by Karma Lingpa in a cave in the Gampo Hills of central Tibet. They were the first made available to the West in English in 1927 by the American theosophist Walter Evans Wentz. Since these teachings have been published in various book editions, going by different book titles. Like the other great cosmologies, the Tibetan Bardo teaches that there are several stages to the journey once the consciousness of an individual passes out of its physical existence. The first stage lasts for 3.5 to 7 days, during which time the person's consciousness becomes aware that it's dead. This is why traditionally there was the mourning period of 3 to 7 days before the body was buried, the equivalent to the Jewish custom of sitting Shiva, saying prayers for the passing of the soul. This is also why funerals often take place 3 to 7 days after a person has died. During this time, the tethers of the etheric double are gradually being shed. The Bardo Thodol tells us that during the next 7 days, the person's consciousness encounters 42 benevolent beings of light called the peaceful deities. Interesting. At this time, it is given a repeated chance to recognize that the light from these great beings is actually an emanation of that person's own essential Buddha nature. Wow. Wow. So, I'm going to read that one more time. The Bardo tells us that during the next 7 days, the person's consciousness encounters 42 benevolent beings of light called the peaceful deities that in essence are emanating your own essential Buddha nature. That's beautiful. Similarly, the Egyptians write about the 42 assessors that are present for the soul's life review. Since there is some accord with this number, I imagine that these 42 assessors, a number reported in both the Tibetan and the Egyptian practices, are the same benevolent emanations. If one's consciousness has enough awareness to recognize itself in these loving lords of light as facets of its own enlightenment, then it is finally liberated from the cycle of samsara. In effect, it reunites with its higher angelic self and becomes self-realized. This is a remarkable revelation. Wow. However, most of us do not recognize our celestial self, believing that everything that we encounter is outside of ourselves. Instead, we project our beliefs into the world, believing that we are meeting spiritual figures like Jesus, Buddha, or our own guardian angels. Most of us are so steeped into our own beliefs, laden with fears, thought forms, and karmic patterns, that we completely miss the opportunity. The Tibetan wisdom reports that when we are approached by these brilliant emanations of light, at the same time, a far dimmer light is presented to us. This dimmer light emanates from the 6 illusionary planes where the soul may continue to take its birth if it does not become enlightened. Surprisingly, most souls flee from the brilliant light and are instead drawn to the dimmer light, in turn causing the soul to be drawn down into yet another cycle of incarnation into the lower worlds. Wow, that's profound. In the Tibetan teachings, if the person's consciousness does not choose to follow these 42 peaceful deities, it then encounters 58 wrathful deities. Whoa. Over the next 7 days. If the soul realizes that these wrathful deities are merely an illusion of the mind, or they are the projections of its very own fears and its own paranoia, then it has another chance to become self-realized. Wow. However, most of us do not see through these frightening apparitions, and thus we were drawn into one of the intermediate regions of the astral plane, and this is where we will spend some time before eventually reincarnating again in one of the 6 lower dimensionals or locus. Wow. Winning against Apophis. While the traditional Buddhism interprets these peaceful and wrathful deities as projections of our own enlightened potentials, the wrathful deities seen reminiscent of Egyptian cosmology, in which the soul must face a series of frightening obstacles in its journey through the underworld. This includes crocodiles. Oh my God, that's Peter Pan. Captain Hook, he's only afraid of the crocodile. Tick tock, talk. So, these include the crocodiles that lurk in the underbrush, a lake of fire, and of course the frightening figure of the many-headed snake, Apophis. The crocodile represents those unacknowledged fears that lurk in the shadows. The lake of fire is our refusal to turn towards the shining light of our own being. And the Apophis is the beast that would steal the heart and the soul as it makes its way towards heaven. Apophis represents the unleashed aspect of the shadow, which may appear wrathful, blaming, aggressive, addictive, or even seductive. Religious philosopher Jeremy Nadler gives us the insight into this deeper meaning of the journey in the Temple of the Cosmos. The journey through the underworld is a purgatorial journey. In the course of it, the Ba, or soul, must free itself from all the elements in its nature that are inconsistent with Ma'at. And this process of becoming free is pictured as involving 3 stages. First of all, the negative energy presents itself to the traveler as an autonomous force. Second, the traveler and opposing force engage in a struggle. The opposer wants to still the traveler's heart and take away the traveler's magic power or kill the traveler's soul. That is, to cut the Ba off from all contact with its spiritual source. The aim of the traveler, by contrast, is not to kill or eliminate the opposer, but rather to master it. This is the 3rd stage of the process. For in accomplishing this difficult feat, one actually wins for oneself, for one's higher purpose, all the negative energy by which one was initially opposed. This appropriation of negative energy, the transformation of one's demons into beneficent demons, so you will transmute these energies. As one modern psychologist has put it, it is critical to the whole notion of journeying through the underworld, in contrast to merely stagnating within it. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, we learn that during this fateful voyage, no matter how hard Ra and Set battle against Apophis, it is impossible for them to win against the negative forces. To succeed, the soul and the ego, Ra and Set, must have the help of the Christ itself, the Oversoul. That's the angelic self, the Oversoul. That's what I see. In Egyptian cosmology, that Christed aspect is represented by Osiris, the great humanitarian, god of regeneration. Yeah. Calling on Osiris would be the same as calling on the power of Jesus or Buddha today. In Egyptian cosmology, Osiris sits in the halls of Amente for the antechamber of heaven as the Lord of light and the giver of grace. Followers of Osiris called themselves Christian long before the time of Jesus. They believing in the transforming power of the KRST, all capitalized. Ooh, sorry. KRST. I don't know if I can show it to you. There we go. KRST. Christ, or anointed and perfected human. In many years of research, I have come to believe that Osiris is an earlier embodiment of Jesus, and both were avatars, and they were incarnations of what in Hinduism are called the 4 Kumras, the 4 sages or rishis, the ones who roam the universe and periodically come to earth to uplift the world. This Christed aspect of the cosmic soul, or the living Atman, the divine Parshuddha, that lives within us all. In the great mystery traditions, the story of Set and Ra doing battle with Apophis in reality is about how our human ego can only get so far without the light of the higher self to help it. As the boat of 1,000,000 years travels throughout the 12 hours of the night, it reflects the sun's voyage through the underworld. Ra represents our conscious self, while Set represents the little ego. Both struggle against the chaotic Apophysis, one who represents the unheld shadow within. Yet, no matter what they do, they cannot seem to win. Finally, in the 6th hour of the night, when all seems lost, Osiris arrives. He symbolizes the inner master, or the Christ itself. It is only then that the battle begins to change. Through the appearance of this higher light, the shadow is finally defeated, and Set, the ego, the little self, is slain. Now light triumphs over darkness, and ignorance is vanquished. The soul has died unto itself. This is why the spiritual initiates were called the twice born, echoing the words of Jesus, who tells us, "Except as ye be born again, ye cannot see the kingdom of heaven." John 3:3. Of course, over the course of the next few hours, the soul undergoes a profound transformation, eventually emerging as a butterfly. Wow! This newly awakened angelic self. Nader notes that the rebirth of Ra corresponds to the initiation of the underworld traveler into the exalted state of consciousness that characterizes those who achieve in the inner identification with the Ku, or the radiant higher self, inside themselves. In this way, the journey through the underworld was eventually a journey towards joining with your higher self and the vital, eternal core of who we are. The rivers of light and the boat of 1,000,000 years. The metaphor of the boat that travels between the dimensions is also found in other spiritual traditions. Celtic lore describes a celestial boat that talks about the deceased and takes them to paradise, called Avalon. This is why the bodies of the ancient kings were also set loose upon the sea in boats. A warrior would shoot a flaming arrow into the boat as the king's spirit was released from its world. Dante's Divine Comedy also depicts a celestial boat overseen by an archangel, which transports the soul into the higher heavens. What are these rivers? There are several possibilities. First, we have reports from the near-death experiencers of tunnels that seem to effortlessly transport the newly deceased from the earth into the Chakiti Bardo. According to Buddhist teaching, this is the primordial clear light that we first encountered when we passed to the other side. These tunnels seem like wormholes, rivers of energy that scoop up the soul, or in the case of the Tibetan teachings, the consciousness of the person, and it deposits it in an afterlife. In the Egyptian lore, this boat first takes the soul to the halls of Amenti, the antechambers of heaven. This is where the soul experiences its life review, or in Egyptian teachings, the weighing of the heart ceremony. Here the heart of the deceased is taken out and weighed against the feather of truth, and Thoth writes the results of the person's life in the book of life. If you have lived a happy life, a forgiving life, then your heart is light as a feather. But as if you have a hard heart or a heavy heart, then you have not learned the lessons that were before you, and you must return to earth to start again. People who have had near-death experiences or undergo a deep hypnotherapy about their time spent on the other side are those who have accessed the superconscious mind and thus are able to report on what occurs when you enter these realms. There is deep truth to that statement, and I have done that work, and I have entered into these realms. And when you do this work and you enter into these realms, nobody ever needs to tell you again that you're more than your body. Because when you see it for yourself, you can unpop that popcorn, and nobody can convince you otherwise. And that might be the key, is understanding for yourself that you are more than your body. And as soon as this body drops, you're going to connect with all the parts of you that you didn't remember were a part of you while you were in your flesh. They claim that the spiritual realms are situated and are striated with translucent layers of light. These vast circular traveling paths appear to be very magnetic in nature. They look like stratified clouds of varied luminescence, described as beautiful curving waves of non-material energy. These highways of light are similar to the ley lines that we find upon the earth. Ley lines, which appear to be magnetic, can also be dowsed. They generally follow the course of the underground rivers and mineral deposits. Similarly, in the spiritual realms, these sweeping rivers of energy appear to be magnetic and are produced through sound. People who have died and returned frequently report hearing music. I've heard that music. They are being transported along these highways. In fact, the practice of meditating on these cosmic sounds is one of the ways to tune into these higher realms. I agree. And they may be why chanting has always been a very integral to many of the spiritual practices. Using such tones or frequency raises our vibration and opens our way into the higher worlds. So in the inner realms, our ability to travel from place to place is done on these highways of circular light. Here is an account from a man who crossed to the other side and was taken to meet his soul family. I am riding on a wave, a beam of light. It is similar to the bands of a radio with someone tuning the dial and finding the right frequency for me. I must go with the wave, the bands of lights. The waves have direction, and I'm flowing with it. It is easy. They all do it for you. My mind is in tune with the movement, and I flow with the resonance. The wave, the beam, it vibrates. I am locked into this. It is part of my own tonal pattern, my frequency, the sound of my soul. That was how I was taught. It was the sound of my soul. So, we will continue a little bit later. I will try to upload this. I love you guys all, and we will be starting after discovering that we, when we pass, will be traveling with the sounds of our soul. And the sound of your soul is going to be a vibrational match to what you feel and what you have created in this present moment that we call now. Much love. Talk to you soon. I'll see you on the next one.